On episodes 228 and 229 of Around the Lens, we spoke about the ethics of blurring faces in photos, covering protests and consent with photographic subjects. I want to take a few moments to talk about the topics in more detail for this episode of Around the Lens Commentaries. The article that sparked this discussion was from Poynter, a school for journalism based out of St. Petersburg, Florida. The article, by Elena Miller and Nicole Asbury, provides a balanced perspective on the issue at hand and addresses the major points at the heart of the question, should photojournalists blur or avoid shooting the faces of protesters? When it comes to something like blurring out a person's face, I would reason that the vast majority of professional photojournalists would consider it not only unethical, but counterintuitive to the job of documenting. Could you imagine a historic scene like the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, and everyone's faces were blurred? It'd be totally unacceptable and take away from the historical context of the image. But Dave, you say, these people don't want to get in trouble for protesting? To that I say, people have the right to protest under the First Amendment, and they are breaking no law by doing so. So capturing their face while protesting should have no impact on them or their lives. And honestly, if they're worried about cameras, they should worry far more about the hundreds of CCTV cameras everywhere. Regardless of what either we or the protesters feel, though, the act of photographing someone in public is completely legal. You have no expectation of privacy when out in public, and the First Amendment protects the right to document for all members of the media. I once asked Denver Post photojournalist Craig F. Walker if he or his editor had considered blurring a part of a photo that featured a subject's social security number clearly visible in the shot. The photo in question was from his photo series showcasing a young man going from civilian to soldier, a great story that earned him a Pulitzer Prize. In one shot, a future service member is sitting at a military entrance processing station waiting to receive a physical while holding his personnel folder. I asked Craig if he'd realized that he had published this person's social security number, and if he did, had he considered perhaps blurring it out. He said that neither he nor his editor realized they'd published the service member's social security number, but would inform the member and his family about revealing his personal information. But as a photojournalist, he said it would be unethical to blur any portion of the photo. While I understand where Craig is coming from, and under normal circumstances, I'd 100% agree, blurring would be considered a form of manipulation, and I would refrain from doing it. But in this case, someone can take their name and their social security number and do all kinds of horrible things with it. I would say in this instance, in this circumstance, blurring or blocking would be appropriate, followed of course by a notation within the caption that explains the reason for the blurring. Now, if I faced an editor that said this is completely against policy and would never do it, then I would look for an alternative shot. I wouldn't publish this photo. This photo would have and should have went on the cutting room floor. I'm sure Craig got tons of alternate shots from this portion of the process, and he could have replaced this photo with a number of others had he known what he was about to reveal. And I honestly do think that they didn't know what they had here when they published it. They didn't realize what they had done, and they would have probably omitted it if they had seen what they were going to push out before they did. Despite this story, I'm still of the mindset that when working as an independent photojournalist, blurring someone's face is not ethical. When it comes to photographing people's faces, I have no misgivings when I take a photo, nor do I second guess myself after the photo has been taken. Usually I'll talk to the subject after I take their photo, so I get their name, occupation, age, and background information. This is sort of an implied consent, as I'll have to tell them I took their photo, and if they agree to give me their name, well, they pretty much have consented to having their photo taken and published. But at the end of the day, even if I don't have someone's information, if I have a compelling enough photo, I'm still going to publish it. Now, if they outright ask me not to publish their photo, depending on the situation, like a protest, it's usually not that big of a deal to just not use someone's photo and respect their wishes. If the nature, quality, and uniqueness of the photo is too great, though, I'll consider publishing it regardless of their request. As I'm shooting, I'm rarely, if ever, asking for consent. Usually an event is so frantic and chaotic with so much going on so quickly that to stop and get permission is almost impossible. If I make eye contact with someone and they nod, indicating either a no or a yes when they see me, I'll take the hint and either continue photographing them or avoid them, if possible. But if that person is later doing something extremely important or photogenic, or they make themselves part of the story, any sort of implied agreement kind of goes out the window. Again, if I can, I will avoid photographing people who don't want their picture taken, but that only goes so far. What about the argument that I should position myself and my camera in such a way that I create compositions that don't highlight people's faces? While not wholly unethical, this kind of premeditated self-censoring can project a bias towards one side or another. If you're actively choosing to avoid people's faces, then you're making a fundamental decision that you are no longer an impartial observer or an independent photojournalist, but you're instead a corporate photographer, essentially working for one side. And there's nothing wrong with being a corporate photographer, just don't go around calling yourself unbiased or independent. But let's be honest, the people peacefully protesting should not be the ones who have a problem with their photo being taken. The people who truly don't want their photo taken are the looters, rioters, anarchists, and others who cause destruction. They won't politely ask you to not publish their photo. No. They might steal your gear, damage it, or worse, attack you. I have heard stories of photojournalists being mugged and threatened for doing their job, and I don't want that to happen to anyone. So let's say you capture images of looting, rioting, or other criminal acts. What should you do with those photos? My stance is the same as a photojournalist who I had on the show a few years ago. I will publish any photo I deem worthy. I won't protect anyone, but I won't directly help the police either. I'm not out there documenting for the police or the protesters. I'm there to document for myself and my publication. I'm not out there to collect evidence. I'm there to get balanced and unbiased coverage of the scene. Those who choose to or choose not to use my images can make the judgment call about what to show and what not to show. But my job is to simply record the story, record history, and tell the news. Of course, I say all of that now, but I've never been in a situation where I had a heinous crime going on in front of me. Something where someone was getting assaulted, or worse. In that instance, I don't think I could sit on the sidelines and not do anything. I think at that instance, my ability to be impartial would go out the window, and my desire to potentially bring justice to a criminal would take over. But it's up to everyone's personal decision what they do. And what would you do in that instance? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for listening to my commentary. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to your responses, whether you agree with me or not. If you have a suggestion for a future commentary topic, please let me know in the comments.